Hi guys, welcome to today's live stream. It is Sunday. I'm right here in Phoenix, Arizona. Believe it or not, it is cold outside. I just posted a picture on Twitter when I walked over to the Whole Foods right here to grab a quick coffee so I could answer some questions for you guys. And I had to throw on a jacket. I mean, it's getting a little chilly here. It's not Medellin anymore, St. Bart's, that's for sure. But really super stoked to dive into your questions today, guys. I know we're live on Facebook as well as YouTube. So if you're watching me on Facebook, thank you very much. We sincerely appreciate it. And to start off, guys, check out Rebel Capitalist Pro. That is the online membership investment forum I do with Lynn Alden and Chris McIntosh. They're the pros. I'm just the amateur. But it's got fantastic research in there, an awesome community, of course, and we do live streams with our members just like this, where you can ask myself questions, Lynn or Chris, and I'm on there narrating. And we also divide up the content, so it's very searchable. We're adding on new features all the time. So check that out at georgegammon.com/pro. And that's my pitch for the day. Well, I always do one at the beginning and one at the end. So that'll be my first pitch of the day. But let's get into your questions. That's why you guys are here. Let me show. There's Arthur right there. He's a member. He's in every one of my live streams. Arthur, thanks for hanging out. And Masa is there too. All right, guys. Thanks for hanging out with me on the public live stream. And I will see you guys in about a couple hours on the member live stream. But let's start off here. Question on QE. If QE does not generally lead to consumer price inflation, how does QE lead to financial asset and real asset inflation? That's where, let's see, what's the transmission mechanism and how it works here? Okay, so I'd really encourage you to check out the video series that I've done, or I started uploading on Thursday. I think 4 of the 7 are out, where I walk through kind of what is money printing. And also I go through and I kind of, I don't know if I want to say I use as inspiration, but I took most of those steps right from Lynn Alden's most recent blog post, which if you guys have not checked out, I would strongly suggest you do so. It's just, you go to her website, which I believe is, in fact, I've got it right up here. It is lynnalden.com, and it's her most recent post, and it's the post specifically is lynnalden.com/money-printing. But just go to her website and check that out. It's definitely worth the read. She put a lot of time and energy into it, and it's just as good as one of my whiteboard videos, if not better, because she really goes into the weeds and kind of outlines each step. But that'll help you get your head around why the quantitative easing that they did from 2008 to, call it 2019 or so, did not lead to, we'll call it hyperinflation. I would argue that there was inflation. If you look at the CPI, it definitely went up. It didn't go down. And I would say the CPI is understated. But if you look at the Fed taking their balance sheet from 800 billion up to 4.5 trillion, most people would have said that would have been like Venezuela. And we didn't get Venezuela, we know that. So why didn't that happen? I would argue that, to your point, we kind of got Venezuela in asset prices, but we didn't get them in consumer price, the consumer price index. And also Schiff made a great point when I was talking to him the other day. He said that, yeah, we got the inflation, but the whole entire world and the whole economy wants to deflate. So you couldn't see the inflation because it just compensated for what otherwise would have been like a 50 or 70% deflation in asset prices, or maybe even consumer prices themselves. So I think that's how you need to look at it. But as far as what you're referring to, because it really didn't significantly increase M2 money supply, it didn't increase the amount of, let's call them currency units. And I hesitate to say money. And if you watch my videos, these last few that I've done, you'll understand why I'm not calling it money. I'll call it deposits in the commercial banking system, because I think, I don't want to go off on a tangent, but I'm just not going to refer to that as money. They're liabilities of the commercial banking system. They're deposits, what most people would consider money. But you don't have more, let's say, more purchasing power in the real economy, chasing the same amount of goods and services with the consistent velocity. So it goes into financial assets. Now, let me make sure I'm answering this. The transmission mechanism is typically the banking system. So what that QE did was lowered interest rates, and Snyder would say that it didn't, but the common belief, that was their intention, let's say, is to lower interest rates on the long end of the curve and get people to go into risk assets and to facilitate lending and to create more demand for loans. And then they kind of tossed the baton over to the commercial banking system and say, okay, guys, go ahead. And now you've got more balance sheet capacity to create more loans, go nuts. And the banking system really didn't do that. Now, was that a supply issue or a demand issue? I don't know. But it just didn't really happen. But now what you'll notice is the Fed is monetizing the debt. So you're seeing M2 really skyrocket. So is it different this time? We'll see. I think there's a good argument for it. And you got to watch my next, the part 5, 6, and 7 of the 7-part series. And that'll help you answer your questions even further. I'm not going to let the cat out of the bag. All right, next question. When the Fed is buying public debt, is making QE outside the banking system? See, when the Fed is buying public debt, making QE outside the bank system, is that the reason M2 is going? You're very close. So this is exactly what I was talking about. You're getting warm. You're getting real warm. So again, if you watch the next few videos in this series, you'll be able to understand even better. But you're on the right path for sure. Where would I say the freest country is? Boy. Man, that's a tough question. It's weird too, because see, like in South America as an example, they've got a lot of rules on the books, but they're just not enforced. So contrast that to a country like the United States, where we've got the rules, and most rules are enforced, at least compared to countries like South America. So it's just a tough question. And then also, are you in a rural area? If you're in a rural area, you've got a lot more freedom, I would argue, personal freedom. That's what I see. And if you're asking this question from a standpoint of your personal freedom, it's one thing. If for financial freedom, or maybe growing your wealth, that might be a different answer, because I think you got to look at the trajectory of where the country is headed. What's the Wayne Gretzky quote? You've got to skate to where the puck is going, not to where it is right now. So in that case, I like countries that aren't really headed down this path towards, I know a lot of people get frustrated when I use the term Marxism or socialism or communism or anything. So I won't use those terms specifically, because it's true. I'm not using them by their pure definition, but we'll say these countries are moving away from free market capitalism. And so you got to look at what countries are moving towards free market capitalism, what countries are moving away from it. And I would be more optimistic and more bullish on the countries that are moving towards it. That's an interesting. Joe Biden. Joe, you've been on my last 3 live streams. Is the law of attraction real? How do you apply it? I don't know about that, but one thing I will say, visualization is incredibly important. Very, very important. And this was a huge edge that I had in business that I've never really talked about. And I think it's worth going into here. I don't want to get off on too much of a tangent, but in fact, I don't think I've ever talked about it on one of my videos or a live stream. But when I was growing up, excuse me, I played a lot of golf, and I became extremely competitive in the game. And one of the keys that I learned in golf is before you hit a shot, you've got to stand behind the ball. You've got to look at the pin or look at the fairway, and you've got to visualize the shot before you hit it. You've got to be able to see yourself hitting this shot. You got to be able to see the flight of the ball. You've got to be able to see the positive outcome that you want. If you can't see it in your mind, very difficult for your body to perform. I think there was a quote, I'm sure I'm butchering it, but it's something to the effect that the mind or the body cannot perform what the mind can't conceptualize. So, and I think that is very, very true. So when I got into business, I would use the same tactics because I thought, well, if it works in golf, it's got to be applicable here. So if I was trying to close a big client, let's say when I had my consulting business, before I went into the meeting, I would take like 5 minutes and I'd just lock myself in a dark like printer room or something, or the bathroom, and I would sit there and I would visualize what I wanted to say. I would visualize them, talking, them asking me questions, me having my rebuttals. Then I would visualize, us shaking hands on the deal and it coming to fruition. And I'm telling you, it was just a game changer. And when I would train employees, whether it was salespeople or even telemarketers, I would have them do the exact same thing. I'd have them start to visualize. So again, I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent here, but it's a great question. I don't know that the law of attraction is real. I haven't read too much about it, but what I can say along those lines is being able to visualize an outcome is incredibly important. And that's in everyday life, whether you're trying to, let's say you're trying to date some gal or some guy or something, you've got to be able to visualize it actually happening. If you're trying to lose weight, you've got to be able to visualize it. If you're trying to get rich, you've got to be able to visualize yourself as having that lifestyle. And then that's kind of what allows you to, it changes your thinking and it changes your brain to start thinking ways to achieve that objective. And I think that's where it's most important. What's my favorite place outside the US to live? I love Medellin. So I always suggest for people to check that out. After COVID, I would strongly suggest heading down there for a week or two. And I think you'd like it a lot, especially if your priorities are weather, people, food, cost of living, and then proximity to the United States. It's only about a 3 or 3.5 hour flight from Miami. And I like Eastern Europe as well. I'll be going out to Dubai. So I'll keep you guys posted on that area of the world. And then Jet Set Horse, but I don't know if this gentleman wants me to say his name, but I know him very well. I hope you're doing well, my friend. And I'm hoping to get out to SoCal here pretty soon and say hi. So I think land prices will fall a significant proportion to housing on average throughout the U.S. if we go deflationary leveraging. Man, that's such a tough question because it really depends on regulation. And now you've got a Biden, or I would call it, you've got Kamala Harris as the president of the United States. So probably going to see more regulation. I don't know if they're going to make doing business a heck of a lot easier. So if that trickles down to real estate, which I would assume that it would, but maybe not. If you're putting up barriers for developers or barriers to purchase land or whatever you're doing, that could keep prices artificially high. For how long, I don't know. But if you're getting a deflationary deleveraging, the chances are that most assets, especially assets that you use debt to purchase, are going to go down in nominal price. You said that if we get a blue-red situation, stocks will go way down. Great. Well, yeah, to be clear, and Manarino saying the opposite. Listen, Greg's a super smart dude. I would love to hear his argument for that. And keep in mind, when I did that video, I was just talking about tailwinds. I'm not making a prediction. I'm just trying to explain things. I'm talking about cross currents. You know, if I said, I can't remember exactly what I said in that video, but I think the blue red, I was saying that that would be the most detrimental to stocks, and it could have some headwind there that could force stocks down. My rationale was that you're going to have increased corporate taxes, but it's going to be tough for them to pass a lot of stimulus and therefore put downward pressure. But that doesn't mean that they're going to go down. Again, it's not really a prediction. And you know, Greg's a super smart guy, so I definitely put as much stock into what he's saying as you're putting into what I'm saying, if not maybe more on Greg. He's probably a smarter dude than I am. Definitely knows a heck of a lot more about trading than I do. And see, and that could be, you got to look at time frame. You know, when I talk about things, I'm talking about long-term stuff. I'm talking about 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. When Greg, usually his time, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I'm guessing his time frames maybe a couple weeks or maybe a couple months, something like that. So you always got to think about the time frame as well. Victor's asking, is a good time to invest in mining stocks? Victor, you just have to see if they're cheap or expensive, buddy. Just pull out your chart, inflation adjusted of gold, let's say, and make sure you're looking at M2 money supply, and then look at historic prices of the a basket of miners, and just see if it's cheap, see if it's expensive. You know me, I don't like to try to time the market. I don't like to try to, well, are we going to have a second crash? Is the market going higher? Is it going down? I try to avoid that question and just ask myself, is it cheaper or is it expensive? And if it's cheap, then I buy it. Even if I think we're going to have a second crash, I would still buy it. I mean, a great example I always use is oil. Back in March, when I bought some of the oil producers, I thought that oil was going to go down even further, but I still bought them just because they were cheap at the time. And I don't even know if I've lost money. I probably on paper lost money on them, but I don't care because I'm just going to wait. If oil gets below, I haven't checked it all week. I've been so busy. But once oil gets below 30 again, if it does, hopefully it will, I'll start buying again. And if they go down on paper, great. I'll just buy it even cheaper. I just, that's just the way I do it. And I see, the way I can get away with that is I don't put all my eggs in one basket, right? I diversify quite a bit. So even if those bets don't work out, let's say oil never, ever, ever, ever goes above $30 a barrel for the rest of our lives. Unlikely. But let's say that happens and they're just dead money. They're not making anything. Well, fine. I'm making a dividend first and foremost on most of those. So I'm getting paid. And if they don't, well, that's fine. I've got, a ton of other things in my portfolio. And if I have that same mentality, the chances of me losing money over the long term are very low. And so I'm willing to take that risk. Why is QE for commercial banks needed if there is zero reserve requirement? That's a great question. I think if you asked a central banker, they would say because they're just trying to create liquidity and they're trying to bring down interest rates on the 10-year and the 30-year to bring down interest rates in the real economy to stimulate demand. I think that would be your textbook economist answer. Are you expecting a second big crash like in March? I mean, listen, I can argue both sides. I can give you a fantastic argument for why the market will crash, and I can give you just as good an argument as to why it will double from here. So that's why I don't like to play that game. I like to think about it and do whiteboard videos on what if this happened and this happened, and kind of do thought experiments. It's like a Rubik's Cube. It's fun to try to like figure it out and assess probabilities to it. But as far as it having any, as far as it factoring into my decision-making process with my investments, it doesn't at all. As far as a catalyst, I mean, if this is just trying to think it through, stimulus, that's what I'd say. If for whatever reason, if they don't do stimulus, I think the market assets will naturally, the natural trend, maybe that's the right word, the natural direction of asset prices should be down. I mean, when you have all this debt, you don't have the income to service the debt. And if you don't have more and more debt in a system that's built on debt, then these assets want to deflate. That's their natural path, I guess. Maybe that's what I'm trying to say. So unless you have stimulus, I think that's where they go down. I think it's blatantly obvious that back in March, if we would not have had stimulus, let's just say the Fed did nothing and the government did nothing, do you think the market would be where it is right now? There's no way. There's no way. I mean, who knows? We'd be at, what, 10,000 on the Dow? I mean, who knows where we would be? But it's sure would be a heck of a lot lower. That is for sure. So I think it's all about stimulus. So for me, that would be a catalyst to a nominal crash. And keep in mind, we could have a crash in real terms if we get a massive amount of inflation. But in nominal terms, which is, I'm assuming what you're talking about, that's what I'd be looking for. I'd be looking for the probability of more stimulus, no stimulus. And if it is more stimulus, how much are we going to get? I think, like I've said in a lot of my videos, I think we've gone from a Fed put to a government put. Question, do I think the Fed will allow Bitcoin to exist? Oh, shoot. You'd think I'd learn as a competitor to FedCoin. I think that's up to Bitcoin. I don't know what Bitcoin is right now. Let's call it 15, 16. I haven't looked at it. But, at Bitcoin below where it is now, I don't think so, because I don't think they really take it seriously. I don't think they see it as a competitor. They kind of see it as kind of like a novelty. And I think if we get to a point where Bitcoin is 100,000, if Bitcoin is 1 million, and you see mass adoption, that would change their minds. Right now, I just don't think they see it as a competitor. So why even give it the time of day? But if it were to become a legit competitor in their eyes, which I think would be more and more adoption and a price at, let's say, 100,000 or 1 million, and then I think Bitcoin would have a big target on its back. Now, I'm not saying that they have the ability to stop people from using it. It's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that I think they would try to ban it, and they would try to make it illegal and all these other things. So it's the success of Bitcoin, it's kind of its own worst enemy. But I think it's still got good asymmetry, and I still think it's a fantastic speculation. So question, there was a question about Puerto Rico. Do you take advantage of Puerto Rico 2022, Act 2022? How do you do that living in Colombia? Well, Joseph, you got to keep in mind, buddy, I don't really live in Colombia. I spent a lot of time there, especially in 2019, because I was doing the TV show. And then we parlayed that into you guys know the story. I was doing the TV show, and then I kind of took the resources from the TV show after season 1 and turned that into the YouTube channel. As far as, but I keep my residency in Puerto Rico, and it really depends on where you spend the most of your time. So if you spend, let's say, 6 months in Puerto Rico, well, you can spend 6 months in Colombia. Or if you spend 4 months in Puerto Rico and you don't spend over 4 months in any other part of the world, then Puerto Rico is still your main place of residency. And you got to have your, it's just like a state. You got to actually have that as far as your main place of residence. But if you travel a lot like I do, your main place of residence could be somewhere where you just spent 4 months of the year. So there's a lot that goes into it. So, and I don't want to give you any, obviously, accounting advice or tax advice or anything like that. So you just got to look it up. But if you just do, and also Simon Black has a great paper on it. So if you look at Sovereign Man Act 2022, I think his most recent post that he did on the topic will come up. It's very extensive, very thorough, and it walks you through how to be what they call a bona fide resident. That's an interesting question. What do you think the fundamental differences are or would be between a gold-backed currency and a silver-backed currency? Boy, that's probably a better question for someone like Rick or Schiff. If I had to venture a guess, I would say gold has been a lot more predictable as far as the supply growth. And don't quote me on this, but I'm thinking gold has increased by like, was it 2% per year, something like that? So it kind of just oddly just kind of has grown with the size of the population. As far as silver, I don't know. See, silver really is a byproduct of mining for other things, if I understand it correctly. And I've talked to Rick Rule about this a few times. So it's not as predictable as far as the supply growth. I just don't know why you wouldn't use gold. I mean, gold, I think we've had a long history of it. We understand how it works. Obviously, you couldn't keep gold at the same price and back the currency because you just have an epic amount of deflation. You destroy the economy. But you could reprice gold, and then you could have it back a certain percentage of the currency, and or a certain percentage of the outstanding currency units. So I would just use gold. I think it would. My short answer is I think gold would probably be a little more predictable. Okay, I think I skipped over a ton of questions here because it just shot me down. Oh, Praddock, thank you for Praddock sent me a super sticker, and thank you very much. I appreciate that. So and Ripple Rich, thank you guys or gals. I really appreciate that. That's kind of you. Question: do you see inflation first now that banks era tightening credit? That banks are tightening credit? Yeah, I think you've got to back up a couple more steps, and you're seeing it correctly from this, or you're thinking through the problem correctly from the standpoint of banks traditionally create the majority of the money supply. And therefore, if they're creating that money supply slower, or if more loans are being paid off than are being created, then that's a contraction of the money supply. But now we have an additional component of QE and the Fed monetizing the debt. So they're creating bank reserves to buy those treasuries from the auction. Now, of course, they've got the primary dealers, so there's this shell game. And my good buddies Brent Johnson and Steve Van Meter would say, yeah, but they're not buying those treasuries. The primary dealer banks aren't buying them with bank reserves. They're buying them with actual cash on their balance sheet, and that the Fed is just replacing that cash with new bank reserves, and the banks really can't spend that cash back into the economy because now it's been replaced with bank reserves that aren't really, that don't have the utility that cash on the balance sheet does. And that's a great argument, but it's obviously very esoteric, and it's also very difficult to figure out what exactly they are doing or what they can do with bank reserves and what they cannot do. It goes into trying to figure out and decipher the Federal Reserve Act, and that you can really get in the weeds on that one. I've done it myself. So I think it's regardless of whether they're using bank reserves to buy treasuries, I think if we focus more so on the deposits in the commercial banking system, because that's at the end of the day what's going to be chasing those goods and services with velocity. Or even if the Fed is taking cash out of the system that's on the bank's balance sheet, that cash really wasn't moving with a lot of velocity throughout the economy anyway. So I think that you're thinking about it correctly, but I would also now layer over your thought process how the Fed is monetizing the debt and how that could be creating additional bank deposits or bank liabilities. And I think if you look at M2 just going straight up, going parabolic, since they've done this, that would lead me to believe that there's more inflationary tailwind than if the Fed was just doing typical quantitative easing when they're just swapping bank reserves for treasuries or mortgage-backed securities, and it's all staying within the financial system. And again, if you guys, I'd really encourage you to watch the recent videos I've done on money printing. They all have the same thumbnail because they're all in kind of the same, it's basically the same video that I just cut down to bite-sized chunks and based on topics. So I discuss it extensively there with the whiteboard. So I really encourage you to do that. But to really give you a concise answer, I think even though the banks are tightening, we still could see inflation because M2 now can grow at a very rapid rate even without the banks lending due to the Fed monetizing the debt. Oh, here's a good one. What's my biggest business failure? Boy, that's a good question. I think, Stephen, what you're probably asking is what was the biggest failure from a standpoint of maybe just losing money or, I've had a lot of failures. I think, what's that saying that you can tell how much someone has failed by how successful they are? Point being, you can't be that successful unless you get out there and stick your neck out and have a few failures. And I've had more than my share. The very first business I started was a massive failure. I think even the second business I started was a failure. The first business I started was a t-shirt business right out of college. And that was, I learned a lot, but I didn't make any money. I didn't even make any gross revenue, I don't think. But where I see the problem with this question, it's a great question, but the challenge for me answering it is my biggest monetary loss that I had, where I almost got wiped out in 2009. I lost pretty much everything in 2009. Oddly, not because of the economy. It was because I got into a big fight with a politician, a big legal battle, and he just really tried to put me out of business, and he was almost successful in doing so. That's where I learned the reality of how politicians operate, and that they don't have the best interest of the public. They only have their own interest, and they'll lie, they'll cheat, they'll steal, they'll do anything to buy your vote. That's when that really struck me. That's when I learned that is how it works. I thought before that, I thought that stuff just happens in Russia or just happens in China. It never happens in America. Yeah, it does. Trust me. Maybe even more so here. So that was the biggest financial loss I've ever had. But that really wasn't my mistake. I couldn't have avoided that. I think let me answer it a different way. The biggest mistake that I made as an entrepreneur is I would have shiny object syndrome. I'd try to do all these things. I'd see, oh, I can make money over there. I can make money over there. I can make money over there. Instead of just looking at the main thing that's bringing on all the profit, and then just get hyper focused on that and just keep riding it and riding it and riding it and riding it. If I would have done that, I'd probably have, oh geez, I mean, triple, quadruple the amount of money that I have right now. And that was my biggest mistake in business. And I'm trying not to make those mistakes now. And as far as in investing, the biggest mistake I ever made is I bought something that was expensive because I thought it was going to get more expensive. And that was the property that I bought in Ecuador back in, I don't know, it was 2013 or 14, something like that. I've talked about that a few times. And that's before I had that rule, the rule that I always talk about. And that's a good point, that rule that I always talk about, buy things when they're cheap and sell them when they're expensive. I didn't just think of that. I didn't just hear that from Jim Rogers and say, oh my gosh, that makes sense. I'm just going to keep saying that over and over and over again. No. That comes from experience, and that comes from me losing a lot of money by buying high and trying to sell higher. And so after I lost all that money, that's when it dawned on me, and I came up with that rule for my own investing. And that's why I'm so adamant about it to this day. It's because I've lost a lot of money with that mistake. Now, thankfully, I've made way more on my investments than I've ever lost, but that was my biggest loss for sure. Okay, so that's probably the best. It's a great question, but that's probably all I can think of right off the top of my head. All right, let me go down to the bottom here. What time? Oh, good. We got a lot of time left. Yeah, someone was asking about lithium. Are lithium stocks an opportunity right now, or is the optimism already baked into the market? There isn't enough lithium in the world to even replace the carbon. Yeah, I know Chris McIntosh has talked about this in Rebel Capitalist Pro and some of our live streams. And if I recall him saying that, although there's interesting things about lithium, he prefers copper. And because I haven't looked at a chart, but I think he was saying that because in his opinion, copper is cheaper, but it's the same use case. So it's the same bullish argument. So I would check out copper, Jesse. And again, just for full disclosure, I have not done the research on this myself. I'm just reiterating what I think I remember Chris talking about in one of the live streams we did on Rebel Capitalist Pro. Okay, so guys, make sure, question. Okay, yeah, make sure you're starting the comment with question if you've got one. Was your best investment learning about macro? Oh, yeah. Oh my gosh. Oh, yeah. So that's a good point. Yeah, the investment I made in my own education was the best thing I've that's where I've made the highest ROI by miles. Just sitting down and just listening to all the podcasts and all the YouTube interviews with Jim Rogers and Doug Casey and Peter Schiff and Stan Druckenmiller and even the mainstream guys like Warren Buffett. Listening to the audio books. I'm not a big reader. I don't have the attention span, but trying to listen to the audio books and especially the Market Wizards. I cannot suggest those books enough. That's what really that helped me a ton. That and just going out there and having that take action type of mentality that I always had as an entrepreneur. And that those two things combined are helped me learn a lot, and they helped me learn things very, very quickly. And yeah, that it was definitely the best decision I've made for sure. And then starting the YouTube channel was a great example of that. Starting the TV show was a great example of that. I mean, most people, if you think about that TV show I did, most people would have never done something like that, ever. I mean, I don't speak Spanish. I speak, I can get by in a restaurant or something. I can order food. I can check into a hotel. I can tell a taxi which direction to go. But outside of that, I really don't speak Spanish. So you got to think about who goes to a local TV station in Medellin and books an appointment to pitch the network executives on doing a TV show where not only I'm the executive producer, but I'm actually in the show. I'm one of the main people in the show, and I don't even speak Spanish. And so most people would say, "You're crazy, George. Why would you ever do that? That's insane." But my point is, you just got to get off the couch and take action. And what's the worst thing they're going to do? Say no. So what? And you know what? That also goes back to visualizing. Because if I wasn't able to visualize myself being successful and actually pitching them and them agreeing, and then me being able to actually figure out how to produce the TV show. Because keep in mind, I had never produced a TV show before that. I had no clue how to do it. I had to figure it out on the fly. And so, that visualization allowed me to have the confidence to, whether it was justified or not, probably wasn't justified, but to go into those execs and say, I can make it happen. Trust me. Check this out. It's going to be the best thing you've ever seen. And boom, you go out there and sure enough, you create it and you bring it to fruition. And if it wasn't for that, then I never would have started the YouTube channel. And that's another thing. How many people would have never started that channel because I don't really know that much about macro. I've never taken an econ class in my life. I almost flunked out of high school. No one's going to listen to me, blah, 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 blah. And I know all that stuff because when I first started the channel, people would tell me that in the comments. They're brutal. They say, get out of here, you loser. And I just say, F you, buddy. I'm just going to keep making the content. If you don't like it, unsubscribe. And so anyway, you get my point. I think that's a tangent, and I don't want to go too far down that path. But I think it's very important that people understand the mental game as well. And I think you're your own worst enemy, whether it's in entrepreneurship or in investing. And so if you can just focus on the guy or the gal in the mirror, I think you're going to be way ahead of the game. Oh, here's a good question. If a 10-year bond pays 86 basis points and inflation is 2% per year, so it's a negative real yield, this means a bond is a negative value proposition. Correct, if you hold it to maturity. And that's if they're not lying about inflation, which they most likely are. They're downplaying it. How can the global economy continue if bonds are a negative value like this? Well, I mean, this is a great point. So, and I know Schiff always gets frustrated, and Jim Grant and guys that I really like to listen to will say, how can anyone buy a bond? But you got to keep in mind, people nowadays aren't buying bonds for the yield. They're buying bonds as they know there's going to be a negative carry in real terms. They're just buying it for capital appreciation. So they're thinking that if it's at 86 basis points right now, it's going to zero. And if it goes to zero, they'll flip it. And then, as you know, there's an inverse relationship between the interest rate and the price of the bond. So if the interest rate goes from 86 basis points down to zero, the price of the bond will go up. So they're strict. It's just like the housing in 2006. The housing bubble. People weren't buying houses because of the positive carry, or because they thought they were going to make money, with rents. They knew that they were going to lose money. They knew they had a negative carry, but they just thought that the capital appreciation on the house was going to be significantly more than their negative carry when they flipped it to the next dummy, or the next pigeon, the next person that was stupid enough to buy it from them, the greater fool theory. So that's the same thing with bonds right now. It's the greater fool theory, just like the housing market was in 2006. And also another thing that I'd encourage everyone to consider is you have to look at something called duration with bonds, right? So duration, I'm not going to go into great detail here. I've done a couple whiteboard videos on it, but the bond price fluctuates a lot more as the rates go down. So let me say that one more time, maybe in a different way, so everyone's following me here. Let's pretend we've got a 10-year that's paying 10%, and we have another one that's paying 1%. Okay, and let's say both of the interest rates go down by 1%. So the one that's yielding 10%, the interest rates in the market go down to 9%, and the one that's at 1, those market rates go down to 0%. So they've both gone down by 1 percentage point or 100 basis points. But the price in the 10-year that went from 1 to 0 is going to go up a lot more than the price on the one that went from 10 to 9. You see? So you've got to just do a quick Google search and on what they call duration, and you'll see what I'm talking about. So that's another thing that you've got to factor into the equation. As these rates go lower, there's a greater opportunity for capital appreciation on the bonds themselves if we get a significant drop in the interest rates. So it's something to think about there that most people don't think that stuff through. In fact, they probably don't even understand that's a thing. Let's see. Sorry, guys, I lost my question there. Let me try to find it. Oh, here we go. George, you say you like Russian stock market. Don't you find it risky given the fact that Russia starts a war every few years? Okay. I think I know of another country that starts a war every few years. What is that country again? I think most of you can guess the country I'm referring to. Yeah, okay. So I think Russia's got some company there. So yes, I mean, I don't like that. I'm not going to sit here and say that I like the overall stock market. There's some stocks there that I like, and I know Lynn and Chris are the pros. I'm just the amateur. There's some stocks that they really like, and they've got convincing arguments. The one thing I would say, and I'm not saying that Russia's fantastic. Obviously, there's a lot of downside to Russia there, but I think on the positive side, they got a great balance sheet. They got a fantastic balance sheet. And if you believe that energy prices, more specifically oil, are going to be higher over the next 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, Russia looks pretty good. Now, I did read the other day that Putin is having some health problems, so he's going to retire. So I don't know how that plays out. In fact, I'm interested Tuesday night to ask Lynn how she's factored that into the equation. So we could see some more volatility there, or maybe some more upside, maybe more downside. I'm not sure. I've got to kind of understand what the outlooks are there, so I can adjust my own probability. But they got a great balance sheet, I think, and they're not buying into this, Western move away from free market capitalism. So I like that as well. And they've got some like Luke Oil, I know, is one that Lynn and Chris both like. Spurbank is another. So there's some individual stocks in there, not necessarily the whole thing. And I know last time I spoke with Jim Rogers, but this was probably 6 months ago. I need to email Jim in because I'd love to talk to him again. But I know he was interested in ruble-denominated bonds. So now he could have completely changed his tune since then. So that was a long time ago. So just kind of keep that in mind. But yeah, I mean, I think there's some interesting opportunities in Russia, but it's by no means a panacea. That's for sure. Shirley, I'm not sure about your silver certificates. I don't know how that works. My thoughts on record short position in treasuries. I mean, that's a great argument for them going up. It goes back to why some people would be long. I mean, you could get a short squeeze and the prices could go up, the rates could go down significantly. Again, I'm not saying that bonds aren't going to go up in price. What I am saying is that interest rates are at 5,000-year lows. And if interest rates are at 5,000-year lows, that means that bond prices, including treasuries, are at 5,000-year highs. And that I don't like that. And then, of course, they've got even more volatility because the interest rates are so low, going back to duration. So it's fun to think about, and it's fun to get out the Rubik's Cube and weigh the probabilities and do whiteboard videos on them. But as far as me trying to predict if the price is going up or down and then taking a bet that they'll go up, I'm not smart enough to figure that stuff out. Yeah, I mean, now they're asking about, okay, this person is asking about Luke Oil or an American company like Enterprise Products partners with the Biden presidency, green energy for the win or rude awakening with gas oil. I mean, even if you're big on green energy, I would much prefer to be in copper as a play on green energy than green energy itself. And as far as oil or gas, I just maybe I'm wrong. I mean, but I don't see us transitioning from oil and gas to alternative energy quickly. I don't see that happening in the next 3 years. Maybe I'm wrong. I highly doubt it. If we did, our standard of living would absolutely plummet to a level that's, I think, inconceivable for most Americans. And if you want to know why, just listen to my last interview with Art Berman, or even the first one I did with Art. He's a great guy, and he'll really shed some light on the rationale. It's not that I'm anti-clean air. That's not it. I love clean air just like anybody else, but I'm just trying to think through it realistically. So, and a lot of these green energy companies aren't profitable at all. So why go into something that's not profitable, hoping that it's going to become profitable when you could go into something like copper and maybe a producer that's throwing off a dividend and get paid while you wait? Okay, we've got a few more minutes here. Yeah, so this goes, okay, so Andrew's got a good question, and this goes back to my video series on money printing, and he's got a little bit different take on the question that I've answered a couple times, so I'll just address this quickly. It says, a question, because QE increases bank reserves, wouldn't banks be able to issue more loans, therefore increasing commercial deposits? And M2, yeah, they can, but it doesn't mean they will. They're still constrained by the need to get repaid. I know in today's world that sounds like crazy talk. Like the Fed can just hand out money to anybody. They don't care about getting repaid. Who needs to be repaid? Just give everyone money. But unfortunately, or fortunately, the banks have to look at the individual they're lending to and say, oh, okay, what's my chances? What's the likelihood of me getting paid back? And if there's no good borrowers out there, what are you going to do? And you're not going. It doesn't matter how much balance sheet capacity you have. It doesn't matter if you could create a quadrillion dollars in loans. If you're not going to get paid back, you're not going to lend any money. And then I also would encourage you to think about the demand side of the equation, because no one ever does that. They just, oh my gosh, the banks can lend limitless money because they have no reserve requirements. We all need to look out for hyperinflation. And I agree that that makes the system more fragile, but they're not considering the fact that if no one is borrowing money, if no one wants a loan, they're not. Unfortunately, the banks have to have customers. There needs to be demand for those loans, and therefore income would need to increase. And stability, I think, would also need to increase, because people have to look at the future and say, okay, I'm confident that things are going to be better. And I think right now what's going on with the cerveza sickness and whatnot, I don't think there's a ton of confidence in the stability of the next 6 months, year, etc. So I think that's weighing on people's decision to borrow money. Now you look at the housing, I know that's going up. You look at, but other things, I think people, and see the housing might be going up more of a supply side there instead of a demand side. So my point is you've got to look at both sides of the equation, right? So just because they have more balance sheet capacity, just because they have more bank reserves, just because they can lend more money, doesn't necessarily mean they will lend more money. There's a lot more that goes into it. Real estate in Hawaii, good or bad? Charlie, I'd ask you, buddy, is it cheap or is it expensive? That'll give you your answer. Yeah. So John, this is a great question. John says, thanks for the show, George. Do you follow a checklist when you invest in stocks? Oh, checklist. I thought you said a watch list. I read that too quickly. So, well, I do have a watch list. I'm a big fan of creating watch lists for things that I want to buy, and just not buying them and just watching them and seeing when they get cheap. And I really like doing that. My sister actually does that. She has a lot of luck with it. But as far as a checklist, kind of. I mean, it's not too rigid, but I'm going to look at I'm going to try to determine first and foremost if it's cheap or if it's expensive. And then once I've kind of got a decent idea there, then I'm going to dig a little bit further. If it's a specific company, I'm going to look at the financials. I'm going to look at you know what I do first is I try to look at the financials just through the lens of an entrepreneur. Like, I try to take myself back to prior to 2012, when I used to buy and kind of sell, small and mid-sized businesses. And I try to just look at a giant balance sheet of a big company the same way I would have looked at the balance sheet or a P&L of a McDonald's franchise. And I use that example all the time because I think that's something we can all kind of relate to. I just try to look at it the same way. And then I look at how the pros are analyzing it to determine if I'm not seeing something. And then what I'll do is I'll go and I'll try to figure out what Chris and Lynn are saying. And then not that I try to delegate my thinking to Chris or Lynn. So many people just say, oh, I want Lynn's stocks picks. And I'm just going to choose whatever she thinks is best. So I don't have to think. I'm going to delegate my thinking to Lynn. No. You want to use the pros in Rebel Capitalist Pro as your employee. They should be your research assistant. So you're looking at what they have to say as you would as a hedge fund manager that has a research analyst, and they're giving you information. But you're making the decisions, and you're the one that's thinking through all the information they're giving you. So then I'd go there, see what's going on, and then I'd dive into those companies and then try to make a decision that way. But you know what? And if it's not cheap, or if there's some reason I don't like it, then it would go on my watch list. So that's kind of my process. And sometimes I do it in that order. Sometimes it's not in that order. It's not that rigid. But on this, keep in mind, guys, I'm still planning on taking 100 grand of my own money and investing it just from scratch. Like, so, and when I mean scratch, I mean, I would go on there to like over the shoulder videotape everything, where I'm setting up an account with interactive brokers. So you see me click this, click this, click this. I got to fill out this paperwork. So you see it, you see the process from start to finish. And then the whole time I'm just walking through what I'm thinking, where I'm going to get the information. And then you see me allocate the $100,000 and which stocks I buy. And, I think hopefully that'll add a lot of value and help you guys kind of think through the process and see what I'm doing and maybe learn a few things. So I'm definitely going to do that. It's just a matter of me getting some time. Okay, looks like we're pretty much last question here. I'm starting my online business in children's fashion. Good for you. Let's see, prior to having a physical store, smart. I'm going to sell niche brands. I'm seriously thinking to move from the Netherlands. Which country? Okay, I thought you're going to ask a business question. I mean, see, you're from the Netherlands, so the Puerto Rico deal is not as attractive. I mean, I don't know your personal situation, so it's very difficult for me to answer. If I was in your position, I would look at where I like to spend time and what my priorities are. Like for me, I like weather. I like good weather. So, and then I just try to hang out in different countries and just not spend more than 6 months in any one place. So you're not a tax resident. And I just get residency in a place that didn't have income tax, like Panama or something like that. And if Panama, I think Panama falls in that category. Don't quote me on that. But you can check out my buddy Andrew Henderson's site and his podcast. He has a lot of info on this, and Simon Black does as well. So Andrew's website is Nomad Capitalist, and Simon Black's website is sovereignman.com. Both incredible resources and guys that I've been listening to personally since I retired in 2012 and have really helped shape my thinking. And the reason I'm saying that is because you get your residency in a place where there isn't income tax, and then you don't spend more than 6 months in any given location. So you're never a tax resident of any other place, right? And so then you don't have to, you drop your income tax. If you're starting a business, most people don't think about it, but taxes are going to be your number one expense usually, once you start making money. All right, let me go down to the bottom here. Yeah, that's it. Okay, guys, cool. I appreciate all of you hanging out with. Boy, we had over 1,200 people today as well. That is awesome, awesome, awesome. And Rebel Capitalist Pro. That's right. We talked about it a few times. You guys know what it is. You got to check it out. We have a $1 trial offer. You will not be disappointed. You will love it. I can guarantee you that. Check it out at georgegammon.com/pro. And let me give some shout outs here to everyone that was on all the way until the end. Eric Carlson, thanks for hanging out, buddy. Joe Biden, you had some good questions today, Joe. Keep up wow. Good luck with your presidency, Joe. That's all I'll say. And we've got Alicia Massa. I will see you in the member forum. We've got Angelique. Angelique, good to see you. I know we go back and forth on Twitter every once in a while. G. May, Amy, Mr. Tom, Bloodbath McGrath, Jim Wolf, DD Crew, EBC, Monty, Pop Basketball, Jose Angel, Charlie, Nick, Brojan, Jose, Micro Business Media, skipping around on me, Tony K, Stephen Jimenez, Radar, I didn't get your last name, sorry, buddy. Pop Basketball, Rigo, Renaissance Man, NPONYC, CPA Girl, EBC, Sergeant Argent, Individual 1, Pratik. We got some names that are tough to pronounce today. I need a little more of that coffee. All right, guys, thanks for hanging out with me, and I will see you on the next video.